Jamie is the first official new character introduced in Street Fighter 6, and though Capcom hasn't released much on him thus far, there's actually some interesting information we can already garner about him and his relationship to the Street Fighter franchise from observing his gameplay, design, and the little info developers have shared with us thus far. So let's dive in and see just how much we do know about Street Fighter's first playable Drunken Fist style character. Jamie is a young man from Hong Kong with extremely long black hair that he usually holds in a single braid that drapes down to below his waist. He dons a yellow, modernized kung fu outfit with a red rope around his waist that holds up a jug filled with, well, we'll get to that. Street Fighter has never had a playable Drunken Fist character despite the archetype being quite common among many other fighting game franchises. While fighting, Jamie can take drinks from his jug, and this maneuver is called the Devil Inside, which is badass, and become progressively stronger as a result. He can level up to 4 times each round. The first time unlocks a target combo, the second unlocks his dive kick, the third grants him access to a command grab, and then the fourth gives him increased walk speed as well as damage and range on his Rekka extension. If he continues to perform the Devil Inside beyond 4 sips, he gains back some of his drive gauge for doing so. In what's likely an effort to make the game friendly to as many ages as possible, developers have specified this drink to be a kind of medicinal tea and not actually alcohol. Fine. The cool thing about this style is that it essentially creates an additional minigame for players controlling Jamie, as they must decide when to try to sneak in these level ups. There are options to forsake a bit of damage or follow-up pressure at the end of combos to instead take a gulp or two. For instance, if a player holds the down input while Jamie is performing his level 1 super, he'll stop the attack early and take a drink. This means that there's a little extra strategy involved when playing Jamie, but it looks to come with some really cool payoffs. Activating his level 2 super will immediately put Jamie at level 4 for a limited amount of time. You can distinguish this visually from his standard level 4 status, as he doesn't let his hair down. Like everyone else in Street Fighter 6, Jamie has 2 versions of his level 3 super with slightly different animations. The first sees him finish his foe with a mule kick, while the second, which does more damage and only occurs if Jamie has less than 25% health, sees him use a gnarly throat strike to KO his opponent. Jamie also incorporates breakdancing into his fighting style, which nicely ties into Street Fighter 6's hip-hop theme. Some of the techniques will surely remind you of other fighting game characters from over the years, such as Tekken's Eddie Gordo or Street Fighter's Elena, both of whom utilize Brazilian fighting art capoeira. In fact, the red rope Jamie wears around his waist resembles the same rope used by capoeira practitioners. As far as what we've seen from his gameplay so far, Jamie's plan revolves around using pokes and graceful movement in the neutral to score hits and level up. Unlike any of the other revealed characters at this point, Jamie is the only one without a fireball to attack from long range with. He can, however, go to the air and use his dive kick, which has both an air-to-air and an air-to-ground attack built into it, to keep opponents on their toes. Capcom absolutely loves to use parts of older Street Fighter characters as foundational springboards for the newer ones. Ken and other Shoto characters obviously evolved from the foundation Ryu laid down. You can see clear inspiration from both Zangief and Armika in the creation of Hugo, and furthermore inspiration from Hugo in the creation of Abigail. There are plenty of other examples beyond this, and Jamie is no exception. In fact, Jamie seems to be built upon the foundations of 4 characters in particular: Yun, Yang, DJ, and even Fei Long. Quick history lesson. When Capcom was adding the final 4 new challengers to Street Fighter II, they were originally planning for Cammy, T-Hawk, and the twins from Hong Kong, Yun and Yang. At the last minute, Yun and Yang were replaced by Fei and DJ because Capcom decided they'd rather just use 1 character slot to represent Hong Kong, and could then use the final slot to get another global locale in the game, Jamaica, as well as feature a black character who was moralistically good, something that wasn't all that common in Japanese games at the time, and wasn't the case yet for Street Fighter, as the lying, cheating Balrog was the only black representation the game had at that point. It seems Capcom ventured back to this particular moment in development history for Jamie, and here's how. The most influence seems to come from Yun and Yang, as Jamie retains some of their most iconic techniques in his dive kick, stun command grab, and Rekkas, the latter two of which are also common to Fei Long. What's more, developers have flat out shared that Jamie aspires to the example set by Yun and Yang, and he defends his town with martial skill. Defending their town with martial skill was exactly what Yun and Yang were doing in their story when they were both finally debuted in Street Fighter III. Also, Yun and Yang's uncle, Lee, was a non-playable character in Street Fighter I who, in the lore, took up Drunken Fist. Jamie's inspirations from DJ and Fei are a little less direct, but still evident. While DJ opted for kickboxing instead of Drunken Fist, one of his most defining aspects was his love for music and the incorporation of rhythm and breakdancing into his fighting style. The least influence comes from Fei Long, but we can still see echoes of him and Jamie in the aforementioned similar attacks as well as the Hong Kong heritage. Jamie is young, but seems to have his head in a pretty good place. He prioritizes justice and friendship above all else, loves his grandma, and is all about sticking up for those who can't defend themselves. Street Fighter VI director Takayuki Nakayama offered a bit of insight into what he was thinking when he came up with the idea for the character. In the Street Fighter series, we hadn't had a Drunken Fist style character until now. We wanted something new that we hadn't had before, and so we looked at fighting styles that fit that, but we also wanted it to be a young character, so we incorporated breakdance, which is a lot more connected to modern culture. We ended up with a character who mixes Drunken Fist and breakdance and decided to use him as Luke's rival. Now, given Luke's status as the protagonist of Street Fighter VI, we begin to see a bit of a Ken and Ryu for the modern age comparison between him and Jamie. With Street Fighter VI taking place later on the timeline than any other series entry yet, developers are clearly playing with an old versus new guard sort of theme. Since he's already been given what looks to be an especially important position as a potential next-generation Ken, part of the first batch of reveals and the very first newcomer for Street Fighter VI, if things go well with Jamie's inaugural run here in the franchise, he could become an important staple moving forward. And at the very least, fans might take a special joy in controlling the rival to Luke, a character who has caused quite a bit of frustration thanks to being obviously overtuned in Street Fighter V's final days.
Easy mode too much?
What do you think of Jamie in Street Fighter VI? Will you be using him in his medicinal tea-fueled Rekkas and dive kicks when the game drops in 2023? Feel free to let us know which of the Street Fighter VI characters you're most excited to try out in the comments, and if you like what you've seen here, be sure to like and subscribe for more EventHubs content. Until next time, I've been John Velociraptor Guerrero. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.